All right, so good afternoon once again. Apologies for the momentary delay, but we are going to get started. Once again, this is the Housing Urban Affairs Committee. I'm the chair of the committee, Councilman John Bullock. Also, members of the committee, I know Vice Chair Yichi Schleifer is also joining us today, along with members Councilman Chris Burnett, Councilman Z. Cohen, Councilman Bill Henry. We are also joined by Councilman Eric Costello and Councilman Leon Pinkett, who also have an item before us this afternoon. We also have staff of the committee, Richard Krumerick, with us. I know we also have Matt Stegman from the mayor's office, and we have multiple agency representatives, probably too numerous to go through the list at this point. But again, I do want to thank you all for joining us today, and thank you for your work during this challenging time for all of us. So with that being said, we will start from the top of the agenda, and that is Bill 180202, ordinance repeal of the Madison Park North Urban Renewal Area and Plan. I know we have both Councilman Costello and Pinkett, so I will turn it over to either one of you if you'd like to make a few comments before we get going.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll go ahead and lead it off. The Madison Park URP was created in 1963 and was designed to assemble the land that would eventually become the Madison Park North Apartments. As is the case, typically URPs have an expiration date, but in the case of the Madison Park North URP, it does not, and it's primarily because of the way that it was worded. But it was anticipated that this URP would expire after 40 years, but it didn't. Over the past few years, there have been two major redevelopment projects that are being considered for Reservoir Hill and West Baltimore. These projects are the redevelopment of the former Madison Park North Apartments and the property at 600 West North Avenue. Both projects are being proposed as mixed-use development that would include a combination of commercial, residential, and office space. The current URP would prevent these properties from being redeveloped in a way that is consistent with the aspirations of the community at large. And so while the repeal of the URP would remove certain prohibitions as it relates to the redevelopment, it doesn't leave the community exposed or vulnerable solely to the whims of the owner and developer of the property. The underlying zoning for these properties still restricts certain land uses and enforces both height and bulk regulations. Prior to and subsequent to the introduction of City Council 18-0202, the community has been engaged on numerous occasions as it relates to its cares and concerns about the proposed projects and the necessity of the repeal of the Madison Park North URP. The community is excited about the transformative potential of these projects and is greatly interested in removing this URP and the other barriers to the redevelopment of these key parcels. Thank you for hearing this bill, and we look forward to a favorable decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Pinkett. And I apologize if I did not recognize Councilman Dorsey, who's also joining us as well, member of the committee. So thank you for joining us. I know, thank you, Councilman Pinkett. I don't know if Councilman Costello had any additional words, but if not, we'll go on to AC reports. Councilman Costello?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my colleague from the 7th District summed it up pretty well. I would note that this URP does extend south of North Avenue into the 11th District, and there is support from the appropriate community associations for this action today. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. And thank you to both council members who have been active in the community and making sure that folks had to see at the table. So it is very much appreciated. Looking again at the agency reports to see that we have favorable from law, planning. We see DPW's defers to planning. CHAP has no objection. Favorable from BDC and both DOT. Are there any other agencies that want to speak at this point? Or does everybody stand by the reports? I'll take silence as indication that there is no change in the reports. And also, are there any other interested parties related to the project or from the public who would like to testify at this point? Doesn't look like we have anybody at this point. Okay. All right. If there is no other additional testimony at this point, I will entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Okay, so that was moved by Henry. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Burnett. Okay, so I believe we are ready for a vote. One second.
Okay, roll call. Chairman Bullock.
Yes.
Chairman Bullock votes aye. Vice Chair Schleifer.
Vice Chair Schleifer.
Well, we'll come back to that. Mr. Burnett.
Yes.
Mr. Burnett votes aye. Mr. Cohen.
Yes.
Mr. Cohen votes aye. Mr. Dorsey. Mr. Dorsey? Mr. Dorsey votes aye. I see the vice chairs. Vice Chair Schleifer?
Yes.
Vice Chair Schleifer votes aye. Mr. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Henry votes aye. Is member Sneed still absent? Okay. Mr. Chair, there are 6 votes in the affirmative, no negatives, and this bill can go to second reader at the next meeting. I'm gonna move, okay.
Okay, so that first piece of business being done, we will move on to the second item on our agenda, which is Bill 190429, which is ordinance vacant structures posting owner information. This interesting piece of legislation was put forward by a member of the committee, Councilman Chris Burnett. So I do want to provide opportunity for Councilman Burnett to make some comments before we get started.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Just wanted to say thank you. We've been on a long road to revisiting this conversation. I did send the members of the committee amendments that are much more than substantive. They are, I mean, it's more than technical. They are pretty substantive amendments and drastically change the bill. But just to sort of recap, the initial iteration of this would have required the property owners of registered vacant properties to post contact information on affixed to the outside of the house. After a lot of conversation with the Department of Housing and Community Development staff about this proposal and listening to feedback from the law department on what was being proposed, we worked out a compromise with this and the amendments, in which, whenever you would like me to, Mr. Chair, we sort of walk through how they changed the bill. But the short version is the Department of Housing and Community Development has agreed to affix a placard onto the properties themselves as code enforcement does their normal duties and annual inspections of all of these properties. I can let them talk about the logistics of that, but that's the pretty key change is the city stepping up to do it and still accomplishing the same goal, which is making the ownership of these properties as accessible as possible, whether they be city-owned or privately owned, to the residents who live in communities who have been inundated with these or are concerned about who's responsible or who to call or what the future of any of these properties may be. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll step back. Again, am happy to walk through it, but wanted to spotlight that we've had a tremendous amount of conversation with the HCD staff on this. Do want to thank them for working to develop a very creative solution, and so move this forward.
All right. Well, thank you, Councilman Burnett. I know we do have agency reports, and as I mentioned earlier, we also have representation from the mayor's office. So I do want to give an opportunity for Matt Stegman to have a few comments before we get started. So, Matt.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. I don't have anything to add on this bill.
Perfect.
I'd reached out about a different bill.
Not a problem. Okay. Now we look at agency reports. We see well, and law had an issue. So would somebody from law like to speak?
Right. This is Vic Turvilla from the City Law Department.
Sure.
The bill as drafted we would not be able to approve it for form and legal sufficiency. But the amendments, which I reviewed yesterday and looked at them again this morning, those amendments, we are prepared to approve the bill for form and legal sufficiency.
All right. And then at this point, did you want to talk about the amendments or do you want to wait until later? I know Councilman Burnett kind of briefly went over them, and I know you just mentioned some of the changes. Did you want to talk about that now, or you just want to go on?
I'm happy for the council member to introduce those amendments as he wishes.
Sure. Okay. Let's see. I know we heard from law. Planning has no objection. Environmental Control Board has no objection. Looks like everybody's pretty much on board. Are there any other agency commentary at this point?
Hi, good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Stephanie Burdock, Legislative Liaison for the Department of Housing and Community Development. I just wanted to reiterate Councilman Burnett's point that we've worked extensively together on this legislation to really empower communities to help us eliminate blight in the city of Baltimore. And we found that when we give them those tools, they are an active partner in our campaign and the administration's campaign against blight. So as the councilman mentioned, there were a number of amendments to the bill. I'm happy to walk through them as well, or I can yield to the councilman.
Okay, well, I know the councilman will introduce the amendments, but is there anything you want to add at this point? I mean, he kind of gave us a brief summary, but is there anything you want to add from HCD's side?
He touched on it briefly, but this would transfer the responsibility of the actual posting to DHCD code enforcement inspectors to take care of during their regularly scheduled inspections every 30, 60, or 90 days. So we're hoping to get about 16,000 vacants posted in that first year. It also removes the confidentiality requirements that are currently in place for the registration statements, so we can make community members aware of how to contact the responsible property owners. It modifies the contents of the sign to contain information on how to access the information set forth in the registration statement. And it also deletes the fines and proceeds and the calculation procedures because DHC will be doing the posting.
Thank you very much, Stephanie. Are there any other agencies that want to weigh in? I know DHC is probably the major one. Is there anyone else who want to chime in at this point? Okay, not hearing any additional commentary. I'll defer to Councilman Burnett if you want to introduce the amendments.
Mr. Chair, it looks like Councilman Schleifer has his hand up.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see that. Yes, Vice Chair Schleifer.
Yes, I just wanted to get some clarity on that because I briefly skimmed through the email that Councilman Burnett sent, and I didn't see it, but it could be there. With this law, does that mean that all city-owned vacants will be posted with the city information on what agency is responsible for maintaining that property?
This legislation is for all properties with vacant building notices.
Gotcha. So within the city, just for clarity, some vacant properties are under one agency versus another. Each one will have the specific agency and contact information of that responsible agency, correct?
That's correct. The responsible agency information will be available.
Gotcha. And that's automatically posted, or that has to be requested to be posted?
Well, it'll be part of a larging posting campaign as we go about and post all of the vacant properties.
Gotcha. Okay, because I briefly saw in the amendments, and I did not read it too carefully, but I thought it said something like that. That the properties have to be requested to be posted by one of a series of people, whether the community, the council person. Is that not the case?
No, sir, that's not the case.
Agree with that. All right, I'll move that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair Schleifer. Councilman Burnett, were you about to say something?
I was happy to just introduce him.
Okay. I'll just hold up.
I'm just nodding along with her responses. Sorry.
Got it. I'll give another second if there's another question from a member of the committee, and if not, we'll go on to Councilman Burnett's amendment. All right, Councilman Burnett.
So just point of order. Can I just move all four, or do we need to do it individually? We need to do each one individually, correct? I just wasn't sure.
Package it. Yeah, we can do it as a package.
I'm sorry, can I ask one more question?
Vice Chair Schleifer.
Yeah, so I'm reading in the amendments, amendment number 2, and it says, so it's talking about exceptions, neighboring property owners' residents. So is that saying in reverse, if they want it taken down, then those people can request it? That's what I'm looking for clarity. It says for a specific property, the commissioner must furnish the name, address, telephone number, email address of the owner or operator of that property on the written request of the owner of residence or properties within a block, the neighborhood association, or the council person. So is that saying the contact information, or can somebody just elaborate on amendment number 2? You're
Sure.
talking about contact information. What is included, what's not included, and then what do these folks have to request, and what information is not being posted that would be requested?
Councilman Schleifer, Jason Hessler, Department of Housing, Community Development. Currently, all non-owner occupied properties in Baltimore City must be registered with Department of Housing, and that information is kept under the code confidentially, although it is permitted to be released to certain parties, including neighboring property owners, neighborhood associations, council members. This amendment would actually strike that confidentiality piece and would allow us to build as part of our website a page where an individual could, when they see that sign, they would have either a website address or a QR code that they could scan, and it would drive them to the website, and then they could enter the property address and see who the owner was and how to contact them, see if there was open violation notices on the property or other information. It would also link to code map. So that's that amendment 2 is just striking the confidentiality piece. We would still, in our registration process, collect who the owner is, their contact information, if they have an agent or a property manager, all that would still be collected as normal.
This is Vic Turvola. I want to explain the confidentiality, why we're striking that. That has always been a problem under the Public Information Act. We had it in a law that we could keep the information confidential, but frankly, under the MPIA, we couldn't. So the bill cleans that up to our satisfaction.
So why does one of these 3 stakeholders have to request that information?
That amendment is simply removing it from the bill. So you're basically, they don't have to.
So it doesn't have to be requested anymore. Now it's just there.
For one, that information is now going to be posted on the premises itself. So no one really has to go to, unless there's something special they want out of the commissioner's office. It'll be displayed on the premises themselves that are vacant.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, Councilman Henry.
If I could provide a little bit of backstory for my colleague from the 5th.
Please.
At a point in the past, the administration was less eager to accommodate the law department's desire to not keep this information confidential. And a compromise at that time was to have certain specific key stakeholders be able to request the information because the concern from the administration at that point was that if anybody could be asking for this information at any time, that, oh my goodness, so many property owners would be badgered. And so we deliberately added this information we added this section in so that there was a way around the confidentiality requirement. And I'm very excited to see this provision go away because there's no longer a need for it.
Well, thank you, Councilman Henry, as always, for your sage advice and wisdom. Much appreciated. Are there any additional questions from any members of the committee? Any additional commentary from agencies? Okay, so we'll go back to Councilman Burnett.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. I'd like to move the amendments as a package.
Second.
Was that Henry at second? Okay. All right. Okay, so Vice Chair Schleifer?
Yes.
All right, Councilman Burnett?
Yes.
Councilman Cohen? Councilman Cohen?
Yes.
Councilman Dorsey?
Yes.
And Councilman Henry?
Yes.
All right.
I have a question I need to know. Housekeeping inquiry to either the sponsor or law. Do we know who the drafter is at DLR, so I know who to send it to tomorrow? Can you hear me?
I think it was Tony that drafted them.
Yeah, it was Tony DeFranco.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. And we're ready.
All right. Ready for a vote? Is one like to make? I accepted the motion at this point to move the bill as amended.
Second.
Well,
So is that moving? Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Henry. All right.
okay. Chairman Bullock.
Yes.
Vice Chair Schleifer.
Yes.
Mr. Burnett.
Yes.
Mr. Burnett votes aye. Mr. Cohen.
Yes.
Mr. Cohen votes aye. Mr. Dorsey.
Yes.
Mr. Dorsey votes aye. Mr. Henry.
Yes.
Mr. Henry votes aye. Member State still appears to be absent. Mr. Chair, there are 6 votes in the affirmative, no negative. We can go to second read at the next meeting.
All right. Thank you very much. All right. We are moving right along. We have one more item to get to before our final agenda item. So the next one for our agenda today is Bill 200538, ordinance city streets closing 2 portions of East Cromwell Street. I'm looking at the agency reports. We see from BDC and Planning Commission are both favorable. Also, law is favorable. Doesn't look like we have any additional commentary at this point. Is there anyone who'd like to speak to this bill at this point?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, thank you, Councilman Costello.
Yeah, I'm the sponsor of this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing. This is the companion bill to a sales ordinance which passed the City Council back in June. That was Council Bill 20-0511. The closing ordinance will legally close Cromwell Street and enable its realignment under a development plan, though it has been physically closed since January in accordance with an approved developer agreement and all associated permits. The legal closure enabling this realignment is in accordance with the streetscape design and major subdivision, which has already been approved by the Planning Commission and is in the final design approval, and the Planning Commission's agency report to the committee. fact, the realignment of East Cromwell Street is aspect 1 of the subdivision approval. And a note was specifically included in the recorded subdivision, which states the former bed of Cromwell Street, through appropriate parcel numbers, will be conveyed to their immediate adjacent private landowner. Passing of this closing ordinance will provide for the conveyance of the former bed of Cromwell Street in accordance with all prior plans and issued permits. Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for the opportunity to hold this hearing, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, and thank you, Councilman Costello, for being thorough and detailed as always. So it's always much appreciated. Let's see. Okay, I see law stands by its report as well. Great. Okay, thank you very much. Any additional questions or commentary at this point?
I have a question.
Yes.
Academic curiosity, why was the sales ordinance moved before the closing was introduced?
There are a plethora of reasons for that, which I can't explain, but that's just the way it is. And I recognize that this is unorthodox for it to go in this order, but this is no different than a normal set of companion bills of a street closure and a sales ordinance.
Okay, appreciate the question and the answer.
Okay.
And any additional questions at this point or comments? If not, we'll accept a motion from a member of the committee.
Move approval.
Second.
Let's see, moved by Henry, seconded by Burnett.
Ready for roll call?
Yep.
Chair Bullock?
Yes.
Chair Bullock votes aye. Vice Chair Schleifer?
Yes.
Vice Chair Schleifer votes aye. Mr. Burnett?
Yes.
Mr. Burnett votes aye. Mr. Cohen?
Yes.
Mr. Cohen votes aye. Mr. Dorsey?
Yes.
Mr. Dorsey votes aye. Henry?
Aye.
Mr. Henry votes aye. Member Sneed is absent. Mr. Chair, there are 6 votes in the affirmative, no negative. We can go to the next meeting.
All right, thank you so much. All right. So once again, good afternoon. I appreciate everyone's patience today. So at this point, we will get to the moment that so many have been waiting for with patience. So again, one of the bills that is before us today. So Vice Chair Schleifer introduced an interesting piece and resolution before us, which is 200237R resolution. Let's lead by example. I did provide an opportunity for Vice Chair to have some comments around this proposal. So please go ahead, Vice Chair Schleifer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So during our most recent budget hearings, we heard a lot about the funding parts of the city budget because, as was said, more money being spent hasn't resulted in better outcomes. We see this in some other places in the city's budget as well, that more money being spent hasn't always increased the performance outcomes. This is seen clearly with the $14.5 million budget that code enforcement has had in the past. It has not resulted in a cleaner streets or better outcomes. The most basic questions I've been asked would be, when seeing how the code enforcement process works from start to finish, why not just spend more money on crews to pick up the trash if that's what the end solution is anyways? Or why not spend more money on cleanup initiatives that I'm sure we'll hear about if the Environmental Control Board is on the line, that I've seen firsthand change behaviors. or even internally, why wouldn't a higher percentage of that budget be spent on the code enforcement, on the special investigations unit that targets the worst offenders? After hearing complaints by our residents saying, don't come finding me before you clean up your own house first, I decided to spend time visiting city-owned properties that are on HCD's list. And what I saw with my own eyes was very distressing. I found countless structures that are missing roofs, that are partially collapsed, and are in unsafe environment. What was even more troubling was that minor comparable violations have been issued to neighbors of those properties. Imagine living next to a house like this one over here that I visited this past week, and seeing that it's a city-owned property, on HCD's list for them to care for, and then the stress of having to see this property every day, and then one day you come along and see that there's a citation for a trivial housing violation, that the city is ordering you to pay a fine. How can HCD say, do as we say, not as we do? I wouldn't want to live next to these city-owned properties because the conditions they're in. And if I don't want to live next to it, I don't want any of our constituents living next to it either. We must do better. I hope this hearing will be the start of an open dialogue between the citizens, the council, and HCD on what changes we can collectively make to clean up the city. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Schleifer, again for introducing this and also for your comments today. I would like to go to the mayor's office. Representative Matt Stegman, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. To mark the importance of this occasion of this hearing, I think this may be the only time I've ever had my video on in one of these WebEx. So it's good to see you always. Hopefully it is good to be seen. So I want to start out by thanking Councilman Schleifer for the opportunity for our agencies to come and talk to you guys about our code enforcement efforts, how we coordinate across agencies, and I think something else that we do want to touch on today is some of the challenges that we have had this year due to the pandemic and due to COVID-19. We are, currently in the process across our agencies of bringing services back up to speed. But we did get a little bit of a preview earlier this year about what coordinated code enforcement efforts, what those efforts look like when we had the mayor's cleanup challenge. And so before we get into the other agencies, I would like to, with the chair's permission, turn it over to Dan Hymowitz from the Mayor's Office of Performance and Innovation to talk a little bit about that program and some of the successes that we had there. And hopefully some of those successes can be carried forward. We can not only come back, to the level that we were at heading into the pandemic, but hopefully learn some lessons and be even better going forward. And again, we welcome the opportunity to talk to you today and learn how we can improve, but also talk about some of the great things that our agencies are doing. So again, with your permission, I would like to turn it over to Dan.
Sure. Thank you. Dan, please.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks to all members of the council here for having us here today. Obviously, a really important issue. So I'll just speak briefly, to start. I mean, I think you all know that the issue of city cleanliness has been a top administration priority. From the start, and that's why we set up CleanStat, which is, as Matt just alluded to, it's a multi-agency meeting where we're using data to look at cross-agency cleaning performance and trying to figure out how to use that to help make the city cleaner. So, again, not to give a sort of a whole history lesson, but I mean, in September of 2019, there were around 15,000 overdue cleaning work orders. So there was a lot of, the work was cut out for us, to say the least. By January of this year, the mayor had committed to completely eliminating the remaining backlog, which had been cut down quite a bit, by April 1st. I think really promisingly, we were on pace. The city was on pace to eliminate that backlog of all the overdue work, key cleaning work. We're down to just about fewer than 100 overdue service requests from that 15,000 number I just referenced as of March 16th. But that's when, of course, the COVID started ramping up here, unfortunately, and caused the interruption of regular service. So just to say that, there was lots of, I think, progress, not just sort of, in the planning phases, but in the actual delivery that was happening before COVID. I'll leave it to my agency colleagues to talk a little bit more about what's happening right now. We are still using data to bring together the key agencies, particularly the Department of Public Works and the Department of Housing and Community Development, to use data to look at these issues. We're doing it every other week now, so we're still using data to try and see how we can help make the city cleaner and to respond to some of the issues that Councilman Schlafer referenced. The fact is, there are a lot of challenges that come with the operations of city cleaning at a time like this. Staffing is just one. And again, I'll leave my colleagues to say more about that. There's just there's even the challenges of operating, of getting ready up, in the morning in terms of the crews that need to go out there and do this physical work at a time when, public health is, really got to be the first concern. So we are seeing service impacts, and we have. And so, the picture is not quite as positive as it was in mid-March that I just alluded to. But I do want to highlight, I think a lot of the improvements that we have made together are still there and ready to be, ready to resume when we are, whenever that is, in a better place with the pandemic. For instance, when we are fully staffed, and you can see in those weeks, we are more than outpacing the work that we are meant to be doing. For example, with dirty streets and dirty alley requests, where we're closing out more than are being opened. Again, when we're fully staffed. So I think the demonstration is there that we've, that the city has been able to make good progress on this. But we are in a tough situation right now. I recognize there are a lot of other issues outside of the pure cleaning operations that I'm just referring to here. A lot more that could be said about some of the other aspects that were referenced by Councilman Schlafer at the start. But I think I'll leave it there for now. Just to kind of talk about how we're still, again, using data, bringing together the key agencies to try and improve operations, even in the midst of what's happening. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for your comments. One of the things that we recognize, to your last point, again, this is a multi-agency issue, and some of the key agencies are with us today. I know that, Councilman Schleifer referenced the Environmental Control Board. I know they had some comments. I know Housing Community Development is also with us. I know Department of Public Works is also a key actor. So again, I will leave it to the agencies in terms of what their reports would be. But is there one agency you'd like to kick off this discussion today?
Mr. Chair, do you want us to save all the questions for the end, or should we ask them of each agency after they speak? Like, I have a couple questions for Dan and Matt. Should I save that for the end?
Why don't we do this? And I think I'm glad you asked the question, Vice Chair. So I think, after each agency goes, we should ask those questions so they don't get lost in the shuffle. So given that you have questions at this point for both Matt and Dan, you might as well go ahead now.
All right, thank you. Matt, do we get to see you again, or I'm just messing? Anyways, so first off, yes, I do recognize those efforts, and it was something that was quite exciting to see taking place and get started. And certainly I understand that, the events of this year leading up to, let's say March and April with COVID, it certainly put a damper on that. And so, as far as the hearing is concerned, I would like to focus on the last complete year pre-COVID, which is 2019. So that's as far as the other agencies moving forward. I know the numbers for 2019 look terrible, and that's understood. So I'm not going to even ask questions about 2020. I'm going to stick to 2019. But as far as Dan and Matt are concerned, certainly would, obviously that's on their reactive side, is cleaning it up, and it's exciting, and I look forward to that resuming. But since you brought up that that initiative, I wasn't even really thinking about that as far as the hearing is concerned, because I was gearing more towards what new steps or reallocations could we do that would be able to have a positive impact moving forward. But I know we brought in some outside help on those initiatives. Can you give us a ballpark figure or the exact figure on what additional monies were spent in that cleanup, so we have an idea of what it costs to clear out a backlog like that?
Councilman, I'll have to look it up and get back to you. I don't have it on me. I mean, I don't want to speculate. I have to look up the cost.
It's in the
Yeah,
millions, correct?
we'll get that information for you, Councilman.
Gotcha. Okay. The next question that I have is, I know for those efforts, there was folks brought in from other agencies, everything from Rec and Parks to DOT, who were physically, getting down and dirty, cleaning up and working on the stuff, which is exciting to see. What are those folks from those other agencies moving forward going to still be doing that, or are they going back to their previously scheduled positions that they were in?
Thanks, Councilman, for the question. It's a great question, and you're right. That cross-agency collaboration was really a critical and meaningful contribution to the cleaning efforts that I referred to. That was that was something we did at that time to respond to the big, the backlog and the goals that we had set then. I do not believe that sort of, multi-agency, again, if you're referring to additional agencies who are sort of specifically tackling backlogs, I don't believe that is currently happening. But it's something that I think has, it demonstrated results. When we pulled that together in the early months of this year.
Right, I agree. And one last thing, I assume you'll have to follow up on this. Do you guys have like an after-action report on those efforts? Like what worked, what didn't work, what can be done moving forward that we can look at?
So the data is on our, on our dashboard, but I think you're looking for something a bit more sort of, descriptive of the whole set of initiatives, and we'd be glad to pull something together.
Yeah, it would be great for these efforts to see an after-action report, because you guys did a tremendous amount of work, which certainly netted some great results for the time that it was going on. So it would be interesting to see what worked during that process and what didn't work, so that we can continue what works and not do what didn't work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair Schleifer. I really appreciate it. So again, I know we have multiple agencies that are with us, so thank you all for joining us. Good to see you on video. So who wants to kick it off first?
Hi, Mr. Chair, Legislative Liaison for the Department of Housing and Community Development. I suppose I will kick us off here.
Right.
Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the role we play in the administration's efforts to lead by example by properly maintaining city properties, and discuss our efforts around community engagement. As part of that broader initiative, we work tirelessly to ensure that service requests for which the department is responsible are completed in a timely manner, including but not limited to those city-owned properties. In collaboration with other city agencies and under the leadership of the mayor through the Clean It Up campaign, DHCD is committed to the cleanliness and the appropriate maintenance of all communities in order to promote the health and safety of our communities. The performance of city agencies is coordinated through the Office of Performance and Innovation, which manages CityStat and is available publicly through their dashboard. As mentioned in previous correspondence, the commissioner expresses his regret that he will not be able to attend today's hearing. However, we will be capably represented by the members of our administration team, led by Jay Green, our Chief Operations Officer, who oversees various DHC divisions and programmatic functions, including those that are the topic of today's hearing, code enforcement and permits and litigation. Mr. Green will also be joined by Deputy Commissioner of Permits and Litigation, Jason Hessler, and Deputy Commissioner of Code Enforcement, Eric Booker, as well as myself to answer any additional questions. Right now, I'd like to pass it off to Jay Green, our Chief Operations Officer.
All right, thank you, Stephanie, and hello, Jay. Thank you. Jay, I think you're still muted. Here we go.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I just want to give if you allow me some time, just to give a brief overview of what the agency does. And like Stephanie said, then myself, Jason, and Mr. Booker will be available to answer your questions. We appreciate the role that we play alongside the other agencies in the administration's effort to effectively maintain the properties and improve collaboration and communications with the citizens of Baltimore. And we'd like to take a brief moment to recognize and express our deep gratitude to our inspectors, who even during and amidst this pandemic are out there diligently working on behalf of the citizens of our city to make it safer and healthier. So we appreciate their efforts. DHCD's role in these citywide efforts include property inspections, code enforcement, and the issuance of citations and notices for conditions such as high grass and weeds, trash and debris, vacant properties, and abandoned vehicles on private properties. Based on inspections, DHCD issues work orders, which are completed by other city agencies, which have this capacity. A large majority of the work orders that DHCD generates for sister agencies stems from our proactive routine inspections of vacant properties, including both city-owned and privately owned and properties, and not the 311 systems or complaints. For city-owned properties, we conduct routine inspections, respond to 311 and other requests, inspect and issue work orders if needed. Efforts by the city are further complemented by those undertaken by neighborhoods, community organizations, and other members of the communities we have committed to keeping Baltimore clean. I'd like to, if with the chair's permission, just give a few high-level data points.
Sure, data is good.
In a typical year, we conduct over, 250,000 property inspections. In FY19, we conducted over 260,000 inspections and they were carried out by 76 inspectors. In FY20, the figure dropped to 2,011, and that's primarily due to the COVID crisis. DHCD inspectors inspect all vacant buildings, the vast majority of which are privately owned, every 30, 60, and 90 days, depending on the rotation, or more frequently when prompted by a 311 service request. And then we create a work order to route the request to the appropriate agency. To date, in 2020, our on-time response rate for these vacant building inspections and trash and weed service requests is 99% and 73% for illegal dumping. Our operating budget for housing inspections was $88.6 million in FY20, and it will be $8.3 million in FY21. And this is for 83 budgeted positions, 75 inspectors, 10 office support, and 8 management positions. In the city of Baltimore, we have approximately 20,000 vacant lots and 16,000 vacant buildings. DHCD's responsibility is for planning and carrying out the reuse and disposition of properties under our jurisdiction. DHCD does not have internal property management capacity or responsibility. These properties are managed by agencies who have that capacity, such as Public Works and General Services. We'd like to conclude by saying that we collaborate with other city agencies under the leadership of this mayor through the Clean It Up campaign, as it was previously mentioned. We're committed to the cleanliness of our city, and we appreciate your time and interest in this important work. Again, Jason Hessler, Deputy Commissioner for Permits and Litigation, and Mr. Eric Booker, Deputy Commissioner of Code Enforcement and Emergency Operations, are available to answer your detailed questions. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Jay. And I see Vice Chair Schleifer.
Hey, Jay, I just wanted to get a couple points of clarity. So you had just, the last thing you said was that there's about 20,000 vacants in the city.
Vacant lots.
Okay. How many of those is HCD responsible for?
I'd have to get the exact number. It's, I think a lot, it's around.
Like a third of that?
Stephanie, but it's
Approximately 5,000.
How many?
It's approximately 5,000.
Oh, so a quarter of that. A quarter of that. Okay, I got you. And then the other thing you mentioned was about the metric of 99% performance on the inspections. Can you explain what that actually means? Like, what is on time code enforcement that 99% of the time gets done?
Yeah, sure, Mr. Green, I'd be glad to react to that question. Thank you for the question. Citizens call in service requests for a variety of things that fall in the property maintenance bucket. We have a response time, a duration time that we need to react to those requests by the citizens. We have consistently responded to 99% of all of their requests on time. Only 1% reaching the overdue status. So that is, in fact, what the 99% is, Councilman. Thank you.
How long is that response time?
It can range from 5 to 15 days, depending upon what falls in the bucket.
So you're saying each item in each category has a different timeline, and so the 99% is based on each one in its category in that timeline?
That's correct.
Gotcha.
And really quickly before we go on, just want to recognize that Councilwoman Shannon Sneed has joined us, so thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. And then Vice Chair Schleifer, back to
Yeah. So also, Jay, you were starting to talk about the numbers, and you were talking about how we're talking about over 250,000 inspections a year. Obviously, that's a lot of inspections. So certainly that's a lot of data to unpack. So perhaps you can help us. So if we can look at 2019, because again, I think we all agree 2020, we got to just put off to the side for obvious reason. And 2019 also, like was mentioned, you guys probably had a really strong fourth quarter because of all these additional efforts in September. So I think 2019 is really a good year to look at to see what we can do better. So you did 266,794 inspections in 2019. That resulted in 56,519 notices written. So the first question I have on that is, how many different properties, how many different locations does that 266,794 inspections represent? Because obviously you have to inspect and you re-inspect, and some things you got to go back again. So how many locations is that 266?
Sure. Well, Jason, I'll start and you can jump in. We have over 32,000 open notices or problems that we have identified that we have to re-inspect several times a year, in addition to the over 55,000 service requests that come in. So some of those are on existing properties, some of those on properties that we have existing notices, and some are on properties that have no notices at all.
Right. No, I understand that, which is why I'm curious, because we don't have that many housing units in the city. So I understand some of them are alleys, some of them are intersections. So of the locations, because one of the things that brought this issue to the forefront is just the repeated calls and emails to the office about the same issues, same locations being issues time and time again. And so that's why I want to just get some clarity on how many different locations is the 266,794 inspections represent.
We'd have to break up the inspections and get that number for you, Councilman.
Okay, thank you. And so you said that there's 56,519 notices written. How many of those notices ended up becoming citations? Because I assume that number represents, even if you give somebody a warning, you have to clean this lot. That's the 56,000. So how many of those became citations?
Well, I don't. A citation can be issued without a notice. I just want that to be a point of clarity. We have a notice and we have a citation. So there are two tools that we have in our toolbox to address whatever problem that we may see. The notice gives a person a time to react. The citation is punitive. So we can go out and do a re-inspection on an open notice and a citation is warranted, or we can go out and somebody could have a trash situation that has no notice on a property and just issue the citation. So we issue over 30-some thousand citations a year.
Gotcha. So again, the 266,000 inspections end up resulting in a little over 30,000 fines being written. Of those 30,000 fines that are written, I guess let's just keep on 2019 so we're all on the same page. How many of those fines were actually paid versus just absentee folks or folks that aren't paying it because they don't believe they owe it? How many are actually physically being paid?
I believe we might want to defer to the Environmental Control Board on that.
I can, in fiscal year 19, $4.6 million was collected on citations issued by HCD.
How many citations does that represent?
That was, well, so that's what, the way they break it out is what's collected by fiscal year. So as Mr. Chief Booker said, in fiscal year 19, we issued 32,000 citations. We issued similar number the year before, and the year before that. As the revenue comes in, it's assigned in. So we issued about 32,000, and in fiscal year 19, 4.6 million was collected.
Right, but right. So my question is specifically because we can't use two different metrics, right? So if the answer is 4.6 million collected, then the question would then have to be, how much was the total amount of all those fines, right? But we're not looking at that because these issues vary. So there's 32,000. There's 32,000. I'm finding it now. There's 32,212 fines that were written in 2019. So of the ones that were actually paid, I think I have the number. I think I just found the number on this spreadsheet. Would it be accurate to say that 18,000 of those were actually paid?
Of the 30,000 so far, yes.
Okay. So half of them end up getting paid. Okay. Now,
more could get paid in the future.
Right. Well, I assume that when we're looking at the numbers carried over, if we're doing a pretty consistent level year over year of citations, that 2019 should look clean. Obviously, 2021 would have a different number considering 2020 was low. So that's how we get into that. So one of the things, and thank you, Stephanie, for sending over all that information. I know I requested a lot of information, and you sent me a lot, and it probably took you more time to send it to me than it did for me to read it all over. So I apologize for all of these questions. But on one of the flyers you sent me, it said, and I think it's on your website also, that illegal dumping can cost you. It goes on to list the different consequences, up to $50,000 in fines, 5 years imprisonment. You can lose your vehicle, points on your driver's license, loss of any city-held license or permits. I mean, all these things the folks that call our offices complaining about the same illegal dumping spots would love to see these things happen. I'm just curious, how many times has that happened? How many times has somebody faced $50,000 of fines, or actually went to jail for 5 years, or lost their vehicle, or some of these other penalties? How many times would you say that that's happened?
Sure. So we prosecute, I would say, about 50 cases a year for illegal dumping. And those are cases that are usually caught on camera so that we have evidence of the dumping occurring, on video, usually. Those cases are brought in the district court. They're criminal misdemeanors. Most of the individuals are normally charged with dumping under 100 pounds, because in the court we have to prove the weight of the items beyond a reasonable doubt. So most of the cases are charged under 100 pounds, which is the lower penalty. And the court will normally not place anyone in jail, although we've had a number of people given days or weekends in jail. We've had a couple of cars confiscated, or seized rather. The common penalty is for someone to face a fine of several hundred to thousands of dollars, and get community service, where we have them actually go out in the community and clean up trash through the circuit court's community service division. So that's the most common fines. It's extremely uncommon to walk out of the district court with tens of thousands of dollars in fines or jail time for anything.
So when you say it's happened, are you talking about like on an annual basis, or are you talking about since you've been with the city type of thing?
Well, we file 50 cases a year, so we'll regularly get the fines and the community service in a case, like every year.
Gotcha. So these stricter punishments, you're saying, when you say it's happened a few times, you're talking about over many years.
For the vehicle seizure,
yeah.
Since 2009, I think there's been 4. And that's really because the seizure of a vehicle is a complicated process, and most people that are caught dumping don't actually own the vehicle. It's either a relative's vehicle or a company vehicle.
Gotcha. And you had mentioned, about the cameras, and so what percentage of these cases are actually like caught on the cameras?
It's almost 100%. We don't usually bring a case for illegal dumping unless it's caught on the cameras. There are some over the years, based on the evidence, but if it's just a pile of debris that's been dumped in a back alley, we generally don't have sufficient evidence to meet the criminal burden to bring that case. So in those cases, we would normally issue an administrative citation.
So administrative citation, what do you mean by that? I mean, if there's dumping in an alley, isn't that code enforcement's role to try to investigate and look through the trash and figure out? So are you saying that if 100% of the cases are ones that are brought to court are ones that are caught on camera, does that mean that 0 cases are brought to court and solved because of code enforcement investigating, going through the trash, finding out who it is, and actually taking it all the way to court?
Yep. So for illegal dumping, if somebody calls in for illegal dumping and there is a pile of stuff in an alley or a vacant lot, something of that nature, Special Investigations Unit would go out, go through that debris, canvass the area to see if there's cameras or witnesses or anything of that nature. So if there is a private camera or one of our cameras or witnesses to it, we would and could bring a criminal case based off that. But if it's simply going through the pile of trash and finding a pizza box or something, a piece of mail that has somebody's address, that doesn't rise to the level of evidence we would need to bring a criminal case. It proves that somebody's trash was in that bag, but not that that person actually placed the trash there, which is what one of the elements we need to prove in the criminal case. So in those cases, we will issue an environmental control board citation to the person that we believe is responsible for generating that trash. If we have enough to bring a criminal case, we do. Now on the residential trash issue, which is more of the property maintenance inspectors, they will go out for trash in the backyard or bags not put out properly, and they will either issue a notice or a citation. And they help build a case for us to take to district court where the citation isn't enough. You hit them with a $50 fine, it should change the behavior of that occupant or that owner. But in some cases it doesn't, and we have to build a history of violations. And then we in the code enforcement legal section can use those notices or those citations to bring a pattern and practice case in the district court to get the property owner or the occupant under an order to keep the property clean or put out the trash properly or store it properly.
And just a couple of quick points here. So, one, Jason, I appreciate you going through the challenges as it relates to bringing some of these cases to court and trying to establish a case. I will say this is one who represents a district that has a significant amount of dumping. Trying to ascertain where it's coming from can be quite difficult. But I do see both Eric Booker and Rebecca Woods on. So again, if you have anything you want to chime in, please do. And also note to other members of the committee, if there are additional questions you have, please ask those as well. So I know, so I'll go back to you, Vice Chair Schleifer, unless anyone else has additional point at this moment.
Yeah, and certainly, like I mentioned, I've done a lot of research on this. I do have a lot of questions. So if somebody does have a question, please pipe up. So thank you, Chairman, for that. Just getting back to that. So basically no full cases, like legal cases. Cause look, Mr. Hustle, I've seen your team in action and you guys do great work when it comes to, when you guys are onto something and there's an issue and it gets to your division and your investigators are on it. We've seen issues get resolved and I appreciate that. So thank you for that. But what I also noticed though, when looking through the budget book, and I don't just read the summary, I look through the detail book, I guess I'm bored. I also noticed that a really small percentage, I think it was, if we're going back to 19, if I have my numbers completely accurate, it was in the ballpark of like 15%, less than 15%, sorry, I think 14 was the max. It was even lower in some other years, as even lower than 10% of the total code enforcement budget actually goes to the investigation. So I mean, it's kind of like when we have these repeat offenders who are the ones who wreak the most havoc, and about an illegal dumping site in my location, which has been an issue. The lady who's there as the president of community association tells me it's been going on since I was in diapers, and so that spot happens to be near the Northwest transfer station. It's off by the train track, so obviously it's attractive to illegal dumping, but there's also I have a lot of constituents who live right there and they shouldn't continue to be subjected to that. So when we see that, like situations like that all across the city, I mean, I would just think that it only makes more sense for more money to be spent on that, because if we're not making cases and taking it all the way and getting to the bottom of it and ending this bad behavior from the repeat offenders, what good is having, whatever the number was, 84 total and maybe it was 75 inspectors going out there and writing this stuff up, when we really should be focused a little bit more on addressing the bigger issues. So as far as operations is concerned, is there a breakdown of how many inspectors there are per council district? I know you have the city. The map Stephanie sent me had 5 sectors in the city. but is there a number of inspectors per sector or per council district? How is that broken down?
The answer to that is yes, there is. The city is divided into 64 territories, of which we have 62 inspectors in those 64 territories at this time. So the answer to your question is yes, it's broken down by 64 total districts across the city.
Okay, so you said there's 62 inspectors?
Yeah, we have 62 inspectors currently covering 64 districts. That's correct.
Gotcha. So I was sent the information in the memo for this hearing says that there's 76 inspectors.
Yeah,
Sure.
Councilman,
Sure.
I'm sorry.
If I may react to that, that is accurate. We have inspectors, we have 3 rent escrow inspectors that handle court cases. We have a total of 6 inspectors that handle court cases. I have 7 inspectors that are in special operations dealing with rental licensing and interior inspections, as well as other special operations details. So that's correct. So when I tell you that we have 64 territories, we have that amount of inspectors, but inspectors are tasked for different details.
Okay, so all right, that's 75, but that's fine. But with those sectors, are they broken down? Like, do you have a number of, like, based on numbers that we look at, like by count? Do you have an amount that's broken down by council districts?
Yes, it's very easy to get.
That's easy to get. Okay, so you guys will be able to send that over.
Yeah, we have a map that has the councilmatic districts and the sub districts or territories within them. The answer there is correct.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Okay, so then when looking at the performance metrics, when it's one of the metrics is talking about closing, to close 95% of SRs on time. Clearly, there's been great debate. At least I've seen it over the past 4 years on the council of with closing of these of that metric, right? Like, what does it actually mean to close an SR on time? So when you're looking at that metric, is that the same as what you guys were saying with that it's once you get out there and see it for the first time, or is there also metrics that you look at and seeing follow-up to make sure that follow-up is happening effectively?
If I may take you through process.
Please do.
Once a service request comes in, our agency has a certain amount of time to react to that SR. And as you stated, there has always been some debate on when does it equal closed. My portion is pretty much an output as opposed to an outcome. So we are the first eyes that see the request of the citizen. We go out to find out exactly what it is that the citizen is saying is a problem in their particular neck of the woods. We don't clean, we don't cut, we don't board. So a lot of times our reaction or response is that of a work order or a referral to another agency. The benefit of us when we're doing work orders is we help to inform DPW as to what level of equipment they need to send to a location. It could be a level 1 dumping or a level 3, which requires different machinery to be mobilized. So when you see that 99%, that is our response to the citizen dropping it in our bucket and then us getting it into the proper bucket for a remedy.
So when you're saying about the output, not the outcome, so how does this, I understand that it's a necessary function to get somebody out there to physically look at the location, and I have some ideas of my own, which we'll get to, but how does this assist the city with minimizing illegal dumping or changing this behavior?
I think how
does it affect the outcome?
Sure. So when you look at illegal dumping and property maintenance inspections, they fall in 2 different pieces of the geography. Property maintenance inspections are property specific. Illegal dumping is usually in the right of way or in somebody's alley unless someone has in fact been victimized and their property has been dumped on. So the actions that my inspectors, I like to consider our inspectors the tip of the spear, as we are the front of everything that leads up to development. If in fact the inspectors do not issue notices, then we could never move anything into a demolition phase or into a development phase because the proper notice was never issued from the beginning. So we are a part of a larger agency strategy which focuses on developing communities. It all starts with the initial inspection of the inspector. And that I would like to say is separate and apart from illegal dumping.
And if I could just add on to that, as an agency, we do everything we can to hold the property owners responsible for the maintenance and upkeep of their property. As we discussed previously, a majority of the vacant properties are privately owned. And being that the city has very limited resources to address the vast number of these types of properties in the city, our first prerogative is really going to try to be reaching out to the property owner through either notice or citation to hold them accountable for the repairs or maintenance needs that need to be addressed.
Yeah, it's hard to subscribe to that. I mean, I've obviously heard that before in the past, but the folks that own the privately owned vacants, I don't think you're going to find any of them that have more money than Baltimore City. So, as far as like resources and stuff's concerned, I mean, I took the list that you sent me of those locations and I went and started looking through them, and I have countless pictures on my phone of, blocks where you have kids out there playing and nice blocks, people maintaining their property. In fact, when I was there on Sunday at one of these locations in the Northwest, you have the neighbor unloading mulch from their car to freshen up their garden, which is something I personally appreciate seeing. But then you look over to the left and you have a house without a second story. There's no roof. And frankly, it looks like the property, which is city owned, is going to fall over. And so, I think that, again, to the title of the hearing is we got to lead by example. So if we don't have the resources to go ahead and deal with that situation, I don't know how we can expect some others. And we're not talking about the bad actors. We all know there are bad actors. There are, people who are holding land, which is sort of ironic because the city's also holding land. But those we're not talking about those folks. We're talking about situations time and time again. Somebody passes away. There's nobody else who takes the property. And that landlord property owner is dead. And so those are the scenarios that we're really looking at, and actually makes up the majority of these problems. And so I would just ask how much money. Maybe this is a question for Jay. How much money is spent on illegal dumping, cleaning versus enforcement? I guess it's probably a two-agency question.
You talk about in terms of actually cleaning up.
Yeah.
Remember?
Yeah.
Because we don't actually do the cleaning up of the dumping.
All right. So why don't you give me the enforcement number, and I'll ask people if they're on here how much cleaning costs.
If I may, we request over 40,000 work orders a year. And requesting those work orders, that's not working to clean, board, or cut. That's stuff that's referred to our sister agency.
Okay, so again, how much does it cost us for that enforcement? How much is it costing us to produce that 40,000 work orders, the investigation, and everything that goes to it? How much money are we talking about a year?
We probably have to back into that number because the inspector does so much more than just inspect. So let us come back to you with that.
Gotcha. Is there somebody on this DPW that can answer the illegal dumping cleaning part of that question?
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Marcia Collins, representing Department of Public Works. And I know we have John Chalmers, Yvonne Moore Jackson, and Kristen Oldendorf on. They're just not elevated to panelist. If I recall from the last dumping report we did, it costs about $10 million a year. And by that, I'm including street and alley cleaning, 3 bags dropped off somewhere, or an entire alley filled with construction debris. So while they're getting elevated to panelist, I'll put that number out there, and then John or Yvonne can correct me. But that tends to be about what we see annually.
Okay, thank you. And so back to HCD. So can you walk me through like the time frame, start to finish? A resident calls 311, reports that somebody dropped a few bags of trash in the back of their house. An inspector goes out and investigates. You said a work order is created. And so is that work order? So if you can just walk me through the time frame and then just explain the process, who that work order is given to and how long it takes for that process to happen.
And really quickly, before you do that, I do want to note that the representatives from DPW have now been elevated. So if there are specific items that they can address, feel free to do so. But I do see Chalmers on there, and I do see a couple others. So thanks for joining us today as well.
Good afternoon, Chairman and Vice Chair. Thank you for letting us in. To answer the question, it's roughly, so we have one SIU crew that actually manages illegal dumping, in the sense of illegal dumping being 500 pounds or greater, or I'm sorry, 100 pounds or greater. So the cost for that is approximately about $400,000. If you include equipment and the crew, the cost would be annually roughly in the neighborhood of about $400,000.
And how many illegal dumping sites would a crew handle on a given year or week or month, whatever metric you guys use?
So for SIU cleanups for fiscal year 20, we closed out 423. That's SIU cleanups.
So then, from looking at the general backlog that has taken place and the one that Mr. Hymowitz alluded to earlier on, what would it take on a regular basis moving forward on a regular year? How many additional of these crews would we need in order to keep up with the demand of these work orders that are created to getting them cleaned right away?
It would take, double the workforce that we have now to keep up with the volume of work that's coming.
And so how many crews do you currently have doing that? You said one?
Well, we have one special investigation unit that goes out and manages illegal dumping requests that are 100 pounds or more. But the illegal dumping to me can be 3 bags in the alleyway, 4 bags on a lot. So illegal dumping will fall into several different categories. Excuse me. It can fall into a dirty street. It can fall into a dirty alley. It can fall into a lot, etc. So, when you look at illegal dumping in one category, you have to look at illegal dumping across all of the cleaning services, especially those that concern public right-of-way cleaning.
So how many physical crews do you have doing that again?
So we have one crew for special investigation unit cleanups. We have 14 assigned crews for your property maintenance. We have 10 crews assigned for street and alleys. And Yvonne, jump in if I got some of those numbers wrong.
So you're talking about 25 crews, right? So when you say double, you're talking about doubling 25 crews to 50 crews?
No, absolutely. If you want the white glove service, and we're gonna continue to clean up behind citizens, then we're gonna need the staffing to do that. We have an aging workforce that we have to, contend with. And the way at the rate that these requests come in, we clean up a site today and pull it off, and we come back tomorrow, there's more trash there.
Gotcha. So basically, what you're saying is white glove service, which I don't think any of us have experienced white glove service really in any category across the city. You're talking about that's another $10 million a year worth of crews.
Absolutely.
And if we had that, you're saying that there wouldn't be these backlogs, and when these orders are created, it would get cleared out pretty quickly.
So let me say this. So maybe I was being a little facetious when I said that.
Okay.
We do need additional crews, but in order to move the city forward, we need to work on this problem on both ends of the spectrum.
Right.
We need to change behavior, because we'll never clean our way to a cleaner city, because government can't keep up with the pace. So we got to change the way that people do manage their waste in the city. That's where we start. So we got to start on the worst offenders. We got to start on these. We got to work on these repeated locations. We got to do a lot of outreach. We got to figure out how to change their culture, because again, we just can't keep up, and that's what's so frustrating.
One point that I want to make right now, I've spoken with a number of the agency representatives that are speaking today, and as is no surprise to anyone, I do have a district that has a significant amount of dumping. I do recognize the challenge as it relates to behavior change. We have a couple things going on in terms of some of the service requests, some of the proactive things that need to happen. Also recognize some of the challenges as far as workforce. I do want to go back to one thing that was mentioned before. I know there was discussion of cameras, and I know I've spoken with agency representatives before, but just so that everybody has a clear understanding, one, sort of the challenges as it relates to getting cameras and what they actually pick up and how actionable that information is, but also anything that we have done or would like to do in terms of trying to change some of the behavior that we're talking about. Because I think we're talking about two different tracks. As Vice Chair Schleifer's mentioning, there are things we do from the city side, and as Mr. Chalmers just mentioned, there are things that we have to do from the agency, but also from the community side. So if we can kind of talk about how all those things intersect, that'd be great.
So in regards to cameras, we currently have 76 cameras that we disperse throughout the city. And Special Investigations Unit investigators visit those sites 2 to 3 times a week to see if any dumping has occurred, if the cameras have picked up any dumping or other criminal activity. We are sometimes contacted by Fire Marshal's office or the police department in relation to other criminal activity that might be caught on the cameras. The cameras are effective in lower traffic areas where people don't normally go and shouldn't really be there unless they're doing dumping or some other kind of activity that they would not do out in the open. Illegal dumping that we refer to, where it's somebody pulling up into the backyard or back alley or back lot or something like that and dumping, is much different than the residential trash issues that we have in the city, and that's why there's 2 different units that handle them in different ways. And Chief Booker's inspectors primarily deal with the residential trash issues, and that is both an enforcement and an education piece that our agency, DPW, Environmental Control Board, all do little bits of in educating the public on how to properly store and dispose of trash. Trash attracts trash. So whether it is someone that dumped a sofa, if it's left to sit there, another sofa or bags of trash or mattresses are going to show up there. And if that sofa is because a tenant in the block dragged it down there because they didn't know to call bulk trash, or they couldn't wait till bulk trash, or a landlord, evicted their tenant and didn't feel like hiring a guy to haul that away properly, or hired a guy that only charged $10 and the guy dumps it there. I mean, there's a lot of ways the trash gets to where it is. We could always do a better job in educating the public, and that is key. We all, talking with Director Woods, talking with Mr. Chalmers and Chief Booker, we all agree that education is key. Enforcement plays a part, as does cleaning, but education is key. And so we do our best in that area, and it would always be beneficial to do more. We've been working with the Office of Performance and Innovation, or in some, before COVID, some really, I think, groundbreaking educational pieces and practices that we've been piloting in a couple different neighborhoods. Of course, it was all thrown off course by COVID, but we had some really exciting things in the works, things that I personally have advocated for a couple years, because the bandwidth in code enforcement is only so wide. We don't just deal with vacant lots and the trash that's dumped or the grass at vacant buildings. We're also dealing with a broader development issue. We're trying to attract people into the city, rehab, vacant buildings, get receiverships filed, deal with tenants that have interior violations, heat issues, other, bed bugs and rodents and other things. So what Chief Booker's inspectors put on the table and end up coming to the legal section, part of it is the cases that SIU creates, those 50 that I talked about, but we have another 14, 15, 1,600 cases that are receiverships or are interior violations or are sanitation pattern and practice cases developed by the housing inspectors because of the activity going around in a neighborhood.
All right, and so Jason, those numbers are the actual numbers of those things are very small in the grand scheme of things compared to the larger issue, right? And so, I mean, there's a lot of things that we're not gonna get to the bottom of today. Like from what I'm hearing, I don't understand. And I actually said this, I think 2 years ago in a DPW DOT hearing on a unrelated issue, where I wouldn't understand here why the inspectors who are actually out there going and writing citations don't work for DPW. Why aren't they DPW folks? Like if it ends up going to DPW to clean up, I would just think that logistically that would make the most sense, that all that would flow, that division would be in there. But just to ask some more specific questions based on some of the things you were saying, because you were talking about the cameras. And I see you said 76 cameras, so I guess that's like one camera per inspector. But anyways, is there a plan to improve? Is there a plan to improve camera utilization?
So the cameras are with the Special Investigations Unit, so it's not one camera per inspector. That's within the SIU unit, where we have currently 14 investigators, and they're tasked with a number of different things, and in environmental or illegal dumping is one of about 20 things that they do. So we have 3 to 5 people that go out and check the cameras on a weekly basis. So they each have about 25 to 30 cameras at any given time. We currently have the number of cameras that we need to address the high dumping areas where a camera would work. We've worked with the council and OPI in some initiatives. We had a suggestion of encouraging private people to put cameras up on their properties. And I know the police department also encouraged that, and there's been some work in developing a network of cameras. So the more cameras out there, the better. We do, avail ourselves of the City Watch cameras. If there's a dumping that occurs and we think a City Watch camera might have picked it up, we'll go and review that tape to see.
Do you also use the DOT cameras, like the speed cameras?
There have been a couple occasions where we've tried to, but we haven't found that very effective because where they're located, and they're usually drawn away from where the dumpings actually occur.
Mhm.
Can I jump in for a moment? This is Councilwoman Shannon Sneed.
Oh, yes, thank you, Councilman C.
So I'm one of the higher districts, one of the districts that has a huge amount of dumping as well. And I question the locations of some of these cameras. Like we have one camera that's outside of one of the DPW yards. And I won't understand for the life of me why that camera is in District 10 outside of a DPW place where we have city employees coming in and out every day. That's not even one of the highest places that a camera should be. So I just don't understand after a certain time why these cameras are not coming down and why that one specifically is there in that location, knowing that we have the foot traffic of city employees coming in and out that yard. There should never, to me, be a location where we have foot traffic and eyes at a certain location where dumping occurs where we can't immediately give it up that we need a camera there, where we have other areas where we know that we need cameras. And it's also baffling that when we know that these high areas that have dumping, that we don't do certain things to work with, to me, DPW, to even DOT, I'm sorry, to work to like close off some of these locations that are not needed, that are just cars don't need to go through. My other thing is I called in something last week and said, well, I know the guy who just did it, who's working on their home. He clearly has, maybe he doesn't even have the right permits, but he just dumped some stuff there, the guys that are working on it. And I said, that's illegal dumping. And they said, no, that's not illegal dumping, Councilwoman. I said, it is, because the stuff is still sitting here weeks later. And no one has gone out to give a citation to that owner, to the people who worked on their house, and the stuff it's still there. So even when we give tips and let you know who's doing it, it's frustrating to know that no one reacts on it.
Councilwoman, I'd be happy to follow up with you after the hearing regarding that specific property and what actions have been taken there.
Perfect, thank you.
And I just want to chime in as well, Councilman Seat, I appreciate, your passion for it, because again, you feel like many of us do in areas where we see, this unconscionable activity. So again, thank you for raising that issue. Much appreciated.
So, but I still have a question. Will that camera be moved, because that camera is not needed in the 10th district at that location?
Yeah, I can look at the history of dumpings at that location, but if any camera that we put up, it's because of either complaints about dumping in a particular place or a known historical dumping location. The yards.
If that camera is there, then in that case, if we're saying that's a high dumping area, then that means all the other locations that we call in the city that we can document ourselves as councilwomen, as council members, and as residents, I would like to see it qualified to see what that location is compared to a location in my district, in John's district.
Sure.
Sorry, Vice Chair Schleifer.
All right. Thanks for having me back. So, all right, where did I leave off? And I see that we're also running up on time, so I'm gonna try to only ask a portion of my questions, because I also have an amendment for this resolution. So back to like code enforcement, right? So how many citation and notices does each inspector issue on an average week?
Well, that Councilman, if I may, that varies, because every territory, every district, every neighborhood is different. Territories have different demands. You have some neighborhoods that have what I call a 3,000 demand, which is a combination of service requests and open notices. And then you have some that may have 600 notices and maybe 1,000 service requests a year. So that varies across the board. And I would have to get back to you with respect to an average. Just know that some places are higher than others.
So is that being tracked on a regular basis? Because I can just tell you from firsthand experience, where I get a call from a constituent that's not sure why they got a certain notice, whether it be high grass and weeds, whether it be dumping. And I've tried to get a hold of whoever's name is on the thing via email or calling in the number and can't get a hold of them. So is there somebody who's tracking, like, is there like of these 84 folks, I assume there's management level folks that are right above them, broken down into teams or something, that are keeping track to make sure that, inspector number one, isn't doing, 80% of the work while inspector two is MIA?
Yeah, we have metrics and accountability measures with regard to all of our inspectors across the board as part of our standard operating procedures. With regard to, I think I heard you say something about calling in and not getting a response. The inspectors are in the office in the morning. You had asked the earlier question with regard to process. They get a run every day, stuff that falls into their territory bucket that they have to go out and re-inspect, in addition to the 311 requests that counts into their bucket, as well as doing proactive stuff. So they're in the office in the morning for about an hour doing the research prior to going out in the field. When they come back from being in the field doing, on average, 20 inspections, 15 to 20 inspections, they then have to input their work. And that usually takes the balance of the 2 hours on the back end of the day, at which time they're also taking phone calls. When they are not in the office, of course, no one will be there to take a call except the office support staff. And at that time, they will leave a message for the inspector to return that call. So returning calls, in addition to the work that they do from the field, is a part of their administrative function.
Right, and so that definitely needs some improvement. And I'm not saying that a council person necessarily needs to get a response immediately, but when you make multiple attempts via email and call to the same inspector, really just trying to get clarity on what it is that the notice says, that certainly shouldn't be something that takes that long. So, and also doing a lot of research on this topic, I noticed that there's a lot of best practices and pretty unique things that are going on all across the country, and really in other countries also, that are available online. Has your crew looked at other best practices that other code enforcement agencies in other jurisdictions have done?
We are actually usually called on as the national best practice. So yeah, Jason and myself, we want to call with Memphis, Tennessee, with other jurisdictions, and we often share what best practices are and what next practices are. So the answer to that is yes. And what I would like to inform you is they usually look to us.
So, I mean, I'm glad to hear. I feel a little bit sorry for some of those places then. But what are some of the best practices that we've utilized or we've implemented from other places that have best practices that perhaps we weren't utilizing?
Well, we have started the development of a handheld device, which is almost 80% complete. The handheld device is something that our IT shop is continuing to perfect. We expect that to be something that will increase the number of field inspections that we can conduct on a daily basis without having to come back to perform the administration function. So that was the one thing that other jurisdictions had that we continue to hone.
Yeah, I can add in a couple other things. Property registration is something that Baltimore City has had for over 30 years. Jurisdictions today are still trying to get it. And I've handled plenty of phone calls in how to set one up, what to look for, what to do. Rental licensing, the city had multiple family dwelling licenses, so anything over 2 units were licensed. A lot of jurisdictions don't have that, and that was always predominantly focused on life, health, safety, and to prevent fires where multiple families are living in a building. And a couple of years ago, working with the council, we expanded that to include all 1 and 2 family dwellings. So every rental in the city has to be licensed. A lot of jurisdictions aren't doing that. When we implemented that, we worked very closely with Councilman Henry, because it was an idea that he had, and we looked at what Seattle and LA and some other cities were doing. Investigation. Sorry.
No, I mean, please don't remind me about that, Bill, because I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't get a call about somebody having a challenge because of the implementation challenges that have occurred with that specific bill. So at this point, I just refer them over to Councilman Henry, and he thanks me for that. But
Can I jump in with one question?
sure.
Sorry for that. So, Eric, I know you just mentioned the handheld device, which I think is a great tool, but one question for you. That will increase your crew's output, correct?
That's correct.
So with that, that means I got to figure out how to gear up to keep up. Sound about right?
Well, it sounds about right to me, because the more stuff that we output, your end is responsible for the outcome.
Right.
So they vary directly.
So I just want the committee to understand that, in fiscal year 20, we managed over 313,000 service requests, 25,000 grass cutting service requests, 6,000 boarding, 2,500 graffiti requests, 300 proactive generated rat rub out requests, and 3,900 citizen-driven rat rub-out requests and 125,000 proactive rat rub-out requests. So, we got to be in a position to be able to keep up with this new technology that HPD has, which requires, again, additional funding so that we can keep up with the flow of work. Without that, we're going to keep spinning our wheels. And now that we're dealing with COVID, we're dealing with, at the start of every shift, an employee has to go in, they have to, badge in, they have to disinfect the biometric clock, then they have to leave that line, go stand in another line and get their PPE, then they have to go wipe down their vehicle. So I just want to put that out there. As we move forward, it's not going to be business as usual. So we're looking for innovative ways to, provide service. But, at the end of the day, at some point in time, we got to figure out, where are we going to get these additional crews from?
Right, and also more importantly, because what I've seen from the beginning of this hearing, where we have such a large number of inspections being conducted, but then a lot smaller percentage of those actually resulting in something, in an action, as far as where a citation or something is needed. I mean, I guess the simple idea would be needing to focus on some of those more challenging things. So back to the technology for a second. For HPD, what technology are you guys using to identify hotspots? I mean, if you're going out doing 260,000 plus inspections a year, I assume your inspectors, especially ones who've been on for multiple years, could probably tell you exactly where the problems are off the top of their head. But what technology are we utilizing to keep track of these hotspots so that we can actually take action to change the behavior there, so that we're not constantly being faced year over year, like Jay said, of 250,000 plus inspections that are necessary. I mean, that's a huge number. I mean, we're not a very large city. The city is only at 60% capacity. This is a city built for 1 million people. We're at 600,000. I'm sure somebody on this panel could tell me how many housing units there are in the city. I know it's in the neighborhood of 1,000, right? Does anybody know the exact number?
Mm-hmm.
All right, it's in the ballpark of 200 to 250,000. So when we see that there's that volume of inspections, that uncovers and shows that we have a very large issue here that needs something different in order to get a different result. I mean, we're sending inspectors out, going to the same locations, doing the same things, creating work orders, sending it back. We're just spinning our wheels. So how do we change that? How do we go from what action we have? It seems to me the largest crew, the first line of defense, the tip of the spear, I think somebody said, is these 70 inspectors that go out there. What action are they taking? What piece of the puzzle are they taking to make sure that they're not constantly spinning their wheels, going back out to the same location, and that there is action being taken. And when by action, I don't mean follow up and sending it over and sending out a crew to clean it up. It's infuriating for people to have the same issue over and over and over and over again. So what actions are being taken in order to prevent that from constantly occurring? That's going to change the behavior, because when you look at the numbers do not show any change in pattern of behavior, or does not change any pattern of the amount of inspections that are required. And so something's got to give. I can provide a couple of suggestions just based on my limited knowledge of the numbers and reading the spreadsheets, but the fact that most of this stuff is resulting in is not resulting in a fine, is end up resulting in us having to clean it up or mow the grass or get rid of the trash. I mean, I use a perfect example. When I looked at, and I don't have the number right in front of me, but I could pull it up. It's in the data that you guys sent me of how many of these inspections are for high grass and weeds, right? So let's take Baltimore City as an example. In the beginning of this, in this grass season, where the grass started to grow, we all noticed all across the city, across the entire city, were overgrown. A lot of grass that was cut by a vendor of the city was not being cut because that vendor was fired. And so it was done at a time where grass grows, right? So I think that actually, we're not going to rehash that scenario here, but I think it points to a struggle that I think many homeowners face throughout the year. We all have our guy that, or gal who, might come ahead and cut the lawn, or might do the landscaping. And sometimes those folks move. Sometimes they pass away. Sometimes they go work elsewhere. Sometimes you have to go and hire somebody new. And so a homeowner whose grass, or maybe even a homeowner's cutting it themselves and they're on vacation, and it just happens to be they're on vacation, or maybe they're hospitalized during that same week or two where we saw this year when that happened to the city, that the grass basically skyrocketed, and we're left this huge issue of medians all across the city with waist high plus grass. So maybe the answer is not to send an inspector out there to so-and-so's house immediately, because I assume the inspector would know that based on how the request comes in, what the language used in the request, what information is provided, and perhaps Mr. Booker can elaborate on this. I assume with the level of expertise of some of these inspectors who've been around a while, they probably know what they're going to get to before they even get there. And that's something that you see across a lot of agencies. They can sort of diagnose a problem without even seeing it first. So perhaps that might be one of the beginning things. I'd like to hear your take on that, Mr. Booker, about how we can reduce the amount of inspections, but focus on driving down these repeat issues that we're constantly facing. So we're not spinning our wheels, but we're actually taking our time and money and effort and focused on changing the behavior, so we're not going ahead and encountering the same behavior year over year.
Again, thank you for all of that. The one thing that I would like to note is that a lot of our challenges are in neighborhoods of inequity, neighborhoods that are very transient. And yes, the inspectors know where their hotspots are, because that is part of the requirement for them to know where their hotspots are, because they know where people are going to or dispose of their trash improperly, because part of our training model is to put the inspector in the territory so that they can become very familiar with the territory. Every now and again, somebody goes on vacation and we have to drop somebody in as a guest inspector, but the intent is for them to know their geography that they're in fact responsible for. A lot of times these neighborhoods are very transient. So when we talk about changing behavior in areas of inequity, we can find our citations or whatever it is that we issue, we can actually find them in the trash can. People are trying to figure out how to survive, whether or not they can pay BG&E, eat oodles and noodles, and we're citing them on top of that. So everything that's bad, they have a double dose of it. And we're talking about changing behavior of people that are in challenged areas. Well, I don't have the answer to that, because that's a larger social issue that we have to grapple with as a city. Do the inspectors know where these challenges are? The answer is yes. Do we know where it is as an agency? The answer is yes. A lot of it is where we're focusing our development initiatives to try to bring some life back into those spaces. So what can we do other than to continue to be vigilant, cite where appropriate? Doesn't necessarily mean citation, doesn't necessarily mean a change in behavior. I respectfully submit. And I often use the example that, I've received a speeding ticket before. It didn't stop me from speeding. I just slow down when I come to that camera. So citations don't equal behavior change. The other thing I would like to submit is that inspectors are trained to solve problems. There are lots of problems in the city that we have to address as inspectors. Some are more in some areas than others. I would respectfully submit that when I look at Northern Parkway and above, we don't have as many challenges as we have the inspectors in that footprint as Northern Parkway and below. Challenges differ based on what neighborhoods the inspectors are operating in. Where there's an opportunity where we have places where people have dumped, we have in the past fenced off those areas because we work with community members saying that people continue to dump here and it's not necessarily the same person. It could be various people. It could be people that are transient coming through. And as Mr. Hessler stated, if you see a mattress, somebody come and put the sofa there. So the silver bullet to changing behavior in impoverished areas, I don't have the answer to that, Councilman, and I welcome any suggestions that you may have because we are open to solving those problems.
Well, that's
hold on, real quick, Mr. Booker. I would definitely agree with you in terms of the difficulty with deal with that issue. And again, having a district that bears a lot of what you just referenced, I understand that. Vice Chair Slifer, I wanted to give the opportunity for Councilman Henry to speak. I know he looks like he had a question. He turned his video on and everything. So we just wanted to get Councilman Henry in here.
It's great to see you, Councilman. Can I just follow up just on that one thing still while we're on the topic?
I'm going to give it back to you. I'm sorry. I'm asking a question now because I was supposed to get on another call at 4 o'clock because I didn't think this hearing would go past 2 hours. So I just need to ask a question and then I'm hopping off. And then you could stay on HCD for the rest of the day. Just kidding. I had a question for Mr. Chalmers and DCW in terms of, could I get some clarity on exactly how the crews are divvied up? Are there 14 crews for property management? Are there 10 for alleys? Do you have that breakdown available?
I do, sir. Give me 1 second. So we have actually 12 cleaning crews. That's the property management crews. We have 14 alley crews, 10 street crews, 3 boarding, 1 SIU crew. I can send it to you. I'll send it to you.
If you could send me that breakdown, I appreciate it.
And actually, if you send that to the committee as well, I'd be interested here. I know Vice Chair would like to see it as well. So thank you. Great.
We'll do it. We'll send it to the committee. Yep.
Thank you. I had also kind of hoped that during this time, Mr. Booker and Hessler would take the opportunity to run out of the room, maybe get a drink, lay down for something. I was trying to provide a little bit of a refreshment opportunity, but that's all I got, guys. Good luck. Praying for all of you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.
Councilman Henry, thank you for the levity. Okay, back to Vice Chair Schleifer.
Yes, thank you. Mr. Booker, I agree 100% with what you're saying. I mean, I think we're on the same page with the fact that citations are not changing that behavior. You are 100% right, and the numbers reflect that, because when you look at the percentage from the highest metric of how many inspections are being done, and again, it's one of the requests of the committee to find out what that breakdown looks like, how many are repeat, so we have that number down pat. But just in looking at the metric of how many inspections are done, which is the 266,000, down to how many end up resulting in a citation, then end up resulting in a paid citation, which I would say is an admission of guilt, right? If you're paying it, you made a mistake, you're paying it, and I assume you're correcting the issue also, because otherwise you're going to get another citation, right? So that number is only 7%. So that means only 7% from when the inspectors go out to when a fine is actually levied and paid, 7%, that outlines that exactly with what you're saying, that fines are not going to be the answer, especially when I scan through the reports that we're talking about. Certainly in some neighborhoods, there's a lot more reports than others. And in fact, in some neighborhoods, what I was seeing when combing through it and trying to map some of the data was that you have areas that actually have some of the largest challenges aren't even getting the reports. So that, I assume, there needs to be a lot more proactive, enforcement on them. But what I would say is that that's really the challenge, and that's where I would encourage, these inspectors to change up certain behaviors, right? And so, and the way that I see that happens, number one, again, citations isn't the answer. Those should be reserved only for the cases where it's absolutely necessary after all else fails. Number two, what I also see and what the numbers state is that there's no need for 266,000 inspections to take place. In fact, what it also shows, the fact that only 7% of inspections end up resulting in paid citations, also tells me that a lot of these cases, especially the high grass, on spots that are not repeat offenders, right? So let's move the trouble hot spots aside. That should be its own category. But in the average one that comes through, somebody calls in and says, my grass is too high. That I'm probably out of town and I couldn't mow it, or something happened, because normally my grass isn't high. It's the first time I've gotten that. So maybe that in those scenarios, and you guys filter through and look through that data that I look through, and I'm happy to discuss that further, that you'd find that inspections aren't always necessary on those. And then the ones where when instead of doing that, you're ultimately sending a notice anyways. In a quarter of the time, 25% of the times, or a little less than that, you actually end up sending a notice. So the notice doesn't say, it's not a fine. It's just saying, an issue to, here's a letter, here's what you got to fix. The most critical thing in sending that letter is that the people who want to fix it, the people who want to participate and don't realize that they're doing something wrong, right? Those are the easiest people to pick off and correct. Mm-hmm. And that is a part of where I think the lowest hanging fruit is, that I've seen firsthand the ball being dropped on. Because if that inspector, instead of having to do 266,000 inspections, in certain cases that they understand is not one that they physically have to go out to for a whole variety of reasons and categories, there could be a process in which you automatically mail out a notice, and they get it to their house. They have an explanation, and it has a phone number. And one of the things that I would request of you, and I'd like to know if you're willing to make this change basically as soon as possible, is requiring each of the inspectors to also include their email address on any notice or citation written, so that if somebody does want to correct it, they have another form of contacting that inspector, not just via phone. Mm-hmm. So that is a request, but I think that it would go a long way that in those categories that I think we can agree on based on the numbers, that they end up getting something in the mail with an explanation, and that explanation be a cleaner explanation. I understand you have to go out, take pictures in certain cases, but there's certain things that if the idea is, and we know that it's not a hot spot, it's not an area that's been a problem time and time and time again, that most likely by sending somebody a notice, letting them know, hey, by the way, that car you're working on in front of your house is prompted your neighbor, you obviously don't say this, but prompted your neighbor to report it. We notice you have a broken down car in front of your house with the hood up and you're fixing it. You are not allowed to do that under this and this subset. 9 out of 10 times that person will say, oh, I don't want this fine that's going to be levied against me. Let me go ahead and do it. So I'll give you time to address that. But the first thing, if I would just ask you, are you able to get these inspectors to include another form of contact, such as primarily an email address on every single thing that goes out, so that they can, that people have a way to contact them?
We don't have any objection to that if it's not already there, and I'll defer to Jason on that. But I don't have a problem with that. With respect to what you just stated, the reason that I have inspectors in territories over a period of time without changing them around is so that they can get familiar with who's in their footprint, where their trouble spots are, where homeowners are, where Miss Lucy lives that's 95 years old. All of that stuff, that stuff that comes with neighborhoods. So yeah, issuing a notice does not equal a fine. And a lot of times we issue a notice and to see what kind of reaction we get from the notice before we'll issue a citation. Usually when we're responding to something that's in neighborhoods, it's usually something that neighborhoods that are homeowners. It's usually somebody in the neighborhood calling as a service request that drives us there, because when we break the city down, we have our neighborhoods that no one will ever call. They will never call with the sofa in the backyard or in the back alley. And what I ask inspectors to do in territories like that is to be the inspector, to be the standard, to be the one that established the standard. Neighborhoods where you have homeowners, they already have a standard. They know when somebody's out of line, and they usually call us via 311 and say, hey, they haven't cut their grass. Usually they'll know whether or not somebody's out of town or whether or not they're a good actor. Or sometimes it's just neighborly disputes and they try to pull us in the middle of them. I have no objection to the email. I don't disagree with you with the notice. We use that as a tool. The citation is just another tool that we have in our arsenal. And we usually do not lead with a citation unless the inspector says in this territory, this is what it warrants.
Right, so I agree with that. So I appreciate your willingness to do that, and I look forward to seeing that on there.
Yeah, Councilman, is it okay if I follow up with you about that point? I want to check with our IT department and make sure it's a function that we can add easily to those notices.
Absolutely, and there's definitely room on the paper. I've seen multiples of them. So as far as Mr. Burker, how long would you say an average, right, just going off an average, an inspection takes on anything? You got 266,000 inspections. How long could we say an average one takes?
Once you're on location, depending upon if you're looking, this is what I
backtrack. How long does it take start to finish? So if you have to leave your office and get there from travel time, that's probably 5 or 10 minutes, right? If you're in that quadrant. So start from there. How long does it take start to finish to get to a location before you get to the next location and completed everything you needed to do at that inspection?
The inspectors have a 4-hour window to conduct field inspections. Some take longer than others because geographies and territory sizes are different. So some people have like over in Councilman Bullock's footprint, those are tight shot groups right there. I can stop on one block and do 15 inspections in 15 minutes, or at least 30 minutes front and back. But in a geography like above Northern Parkway, and when you look at your footprint, we have more geography that we have to cover. So there's a lot more travel time in that footprint. So let me answer your question by saying this. The inspectors have a 4-hour window to conduct their inspections, depending upon where they're leaving from in their respective field office, their drive time, and the amount of inspections that's on their particular run on that particular day dictates how much time it takes them to do inspections. So we give them a window of opportunity.
So I know, so I still don't have an answer on that, but I just pulled up on the map, the code enforcement areas. I don't know if you guys can see based on my camera.
We can't see that.
But you know what the map looks like. And so I keep referencing my area, which is perfectly fine. We can talk about
because I'm talking to you, that's why.
Yeah, no problem. I take a lot of pride in that. I don't know where you live, so I don't know what area to use as an example. And you don't have to answer that publicly. But I mean, in looking at this map, the Northeast and the Southwest are huge territories, followed by the Southeast and then the Northwest, which I don't have a problem with that. I'm not even getting into the specifics there. I haven't mapped out all of your service requests to know whether or not this makes any sense. One thing, obviously, that stands out like a sore thumb if we want to talk about equity, is the Central District, how the Central District is really small. Like, we got like a whole crew like focused on, on like making sure the Inner Harbor looks nice or something. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying perception-wise, it kind of is strange that the Central District is so small. But obviously, I see how there's 5 different quadrants, 5 different sizes. So let's use the Northeast because that's the biggest one, the biggest territory. So and I don't know the areas in the Northeast perfectly, but if you want to go from the center point of the Northeast, let's say you're trying to go from Roland Park to Northwood, right? how long would it take that inspector if one inspection they're doing is in Roland Park and then they got to get over to, to Harford Road in the Northeast? How long would it take them, A, to get there, and then B, to conduct the inspection?
Vice Chair Slifer, before you answer, I'm trying to figure out what's the end game for that question. I'm just trying to figure out what is it we're trying to do.
It's all about efficiency, right? So the end game is like this, right? Okay, so if we don't want to provide numbers, I'll just make them up. So let's say it takes a half an hour to conduct an inspection start to finish in any quadrant, right? So the inspector, it's going to take him a half an hour to get there and conduct it and leave, right? Of the 266,000 inspections that are being conducted, right? How many of those would we say are first-time inspections? If I have to make that up, I'll just say, I'll say a third of them are first-time inspections, and then the rest make up repeat, okay? So if we do that, then there's 88,666 original inspections, right? And then, and so if you take that, those inspections, based on my point before, where we don't have to go out to all of these things on the first issue because we know, or someone's going to contact us and we log it in the system if we're properly using technology, then that inspector doesn't have to do, and based on these raw numbers, because again, I haven't gotten any numbers, I'm saying there's 88,000 times possibly that we can avoid even having to go out and do an inspection, where a notice itself would solve that. So instead of sending something in the mail, which cost us, $1 to send it out in total, it would be able to save us, 44,000 hours. So that's where I'm getting at.
Looks like Booker and Hessler both are trying to say something. So let's,
Yeah, if I may. So every time an inspector goes out and they issue a notice, there has to be pictures taken. The file has to be documented, because when we can't get a resolution with the tools that we have in our toolbox, I have to move it on to legal. So I can't send a notice blindly to someone without having the inspector put eyes on it. That inspector is usually called to court to testify to what they have in fact documented. What you don't have in your possession is you're looking at a map, because we are a little bit more efficient than that map presents. Remember, I said there are 64 territories. So no one, unless they're covering someone else's territory, would have to travel that distance. They have to make it to their territory and own their territory. So we have another map that we will send over to you that breaks down the city with respect to districts and territories. So we're not that inefficient when it comes to drive time. If somebody has to go to the northeast corner, that's where their territory is, so that they're not running across the whole footprint. They're in that territory handling the 10, 15, 20 inspections that they have to handle in that footprint, and then making it back to the office for the administrative side.
Understood. And so that again gets to my point, is that the way things have been done, we're sending out all of these, we're doing these 266,000 inspections, right? But then we're also talking about a fraction of a fraction of a fraction that ultimately ends up in legal. So what I'm proposing and what I'm saying is that based on the data, and I'm happy to sit down with you anytime to review and show you what I'm looking at. It's just the data that Stephanie sent me over, which is a copy of all of the inspections that were done. Right now I'm actually looking at all the inspections that were done in fiscal year 2019, right? Because that's the year we've been talking about the whole hearing. And so what I'm seeing is that the fact that such a small percentage, like a fraction of a fraction, ends up actually going to court, what I'm saying is that I would venture to say that in over 50,000 times that you can send out a letter instead of a person. Because if there's certain cases where high grass at a location that it's the first time you've ever gotten a complaint there, right? There's nothing wrong with a letter that automatically goes out saying, hey, so-and-so, let's say their address is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. They don't maintain their property properly, and I'm talking about Washington, D.C., for those of you who are looking at me funny. They don't maintain their property properly, and so, the neighbor calls in. You go ahead, you send them a letter. It's not a citation. It's just basically saying, hey, we got a report of high grass. Just to let you know, the rules are your grass needs to stay below 6 inches at all times. Please make sure you're regularly mowing. It's something very positive, something friendly, just outlines the law, because most people don't know all the laws that exist. within these codes. And so a lot of people are learning this stuff for the first time. So I believe that a friendly letter could probably save your team thousands upon thousands upon thousands of hours. And then that's a whole nother conversation with what to do with those thousands of hours that we have left available. And I'm sure we can find some place to do it. But that's where I'm getting at, is really just about how we can operate more efficiently. And that's really what I'm leaning towards, and how we do that. And I don't think that the current process in which we're operating is working, because it's not, because we're every year going and having the same ones over and over and over again. So how do we shift the attention from the busy work and focus it on the important stuff like you're talking about, the ones that are constantly an issue?
Well, let me chime in really quickly, because I think this speaks to something that Deputy Commissioner Booker, you were mentioning before, in terms of the difference in terms of some of the inspections, right? That's a quick one versus one that's more extensive. And I do understand in the sense that somebody makes a complaint, someone has to go out and verify that the grass is actually high as well. So I know that both those things are happening there. But one thing I'll speak to, and again, I think this is for everybody, and I see, Ms. Woods, Ms. Burdock, I appreciate you staying with us so long. And even with the Environmental Control Board, I would just say, with all of you, because I think this is probably the upshot of what Vice Chair Schleifer is getting to. Are there things that you would see in terms of efficiency that have been effective, or things we want to work on, given our conversation today, where we need to go in terms of any efficiencies? I think that's probably where we're going now.
Well, yeah, there are things that I wish that I could do with regard to problem solving, but I can't do that. As Mr. Chalmers is challenged with head count, I too am challenged with head count. When you think that 76 inspectors is a lot of inspectors, when you have 62 inspectors that's running the property maintenance piece, and then the others on special operations trying to solve problems as opposed to being redundant, it's so much more that we could do. So we try very hard to be efficient within our everyday operations. We don't send inspectors to Northeast and down to Southeast. That's why we have territories that they operate in. Our development of a handheld tool is part of our effort to become more efficient in conducting more inspections while we're in that footprint. I am totally open for any discussion with regard to efficiency. And Councilman Yitzi, I'm wide open for that. I'd love to have that discussion with you. Mr. Chair, welcome that discussion.
Can I say?
I might add.
Can I say one more thing before we go on to the Environmental Control Board, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, sure. And I know HCD had something, but yeah, go ahead. Yes.
So the last thing I want to say on this, and then we'll go off there, and we'll have subsequent conversations. When it comes to the volume that we're talking about, the answer isn't, we don't need somebody to go out and verify if the grass is high for a first letter. The same way in the police department, we've had this extensive conversation about if somebody's car, let's say, got broken into overnight, they just say, go online and file a report, right? And so that's what I'm saying, is that if we look at even the best practices that are going on in Baltimore City, obviously, we're tight staffed on a lot of things. But if we even follow those best practices and don't, is what I'm saying, to not go out and do 266,000 inspections, because again, if it's not going to result in anything, we can avoid that by sending a letter. Just like we've been told, encourage your constituents to go and file a police report online for certain smaller offenses, because it's not going to be investigated anyways. It's just going to be documented for the numbers. And that's all I'm saying, is that if we look towards that, there's certainly a lot of ways to be more efficient. And I think once we do that, that would solve some of the problem. Then on the back end, we're still going to have the issue of how do we clean this stuff up? But sure. I think if we're doing it on a more positive spin and educating folks with that letter, and it's not just an attack, they feel attacked when they get a letter like that. And it's something more positive and an explanation rather than that, where it's not even like they feel like their space has been encroached on, because nobody came out and looked to see, nobody came out with a ruler to measure your grass. We're just letting you know it's got to be below 6 inches. Now, if you get another complaint, that's obviously something that needs to be followed up on. I think you'll find that you'll save many, many thousands of hours. And with that, I will yield back to the chair for the other agencies that have been so patient.
So yes, thank you. I know it looks like HED or ECB was going to say something.
Yeah, Councilman, I just wanted to add something that we didn't touch too too much on earlier, but it is something that Mr. Chalmers mentioned about the two sides of this coin and the education efforts that all of us as agencies are trying to employ to get our communities to work in partnership with us. I mean, just today we had a hearing on a posting of vacant property. So we are taking these outreach efforts, and some of the things that we produced a sanitation guide in partnership with DPW to educate things about basic tenant responsibilities, bulk trash, recycling day, container storage. We also have a DHCD code enforcement guide to educate people about our building fire and related codes that was recently updated and what their responsibilities are and where those things fall in the building code. And then finally, we have a educational outreach piece called Dumping is a Crime. And we've shared all three of these with you, and I'm happy to share with the committee, but these are some of our efforts to educate people about their responsibilities, whether they be a homeowner or a tenant.
Thank you, Stephanie. And those definitely would be great things to include in those mailers that go out to folks that get reported.
Yes, thank you very much. Is there any additional questions from committee members or any agencies that want to chime in at this point? Again, I appreciate everyone sticking with us through this journey we've taken together today.
I would like to ask how
we do some calling. Yes, please, Rebecca Woods, before we go into our calls. Yes, thank you.
to have housing share the new documents that were created for education materials because we were not aware of that. We've been in conversation with DPW about creating updated materials, so I'd love to see what has been created, and we'd love to share that information. I mean, we certainly love to do outreach through Be More Beautiful, which is our peer-to-peer network that addresses cleanliness in the community grassroots level, and then also through our Care Lot program, which provides funding to community organizations to maintain vacant lots, and our Say Yes program, which provides stipends to youth participants to clean in their neighborhood. So for ECB's portion, I'm happy to go over everything that we do. I don't know at this point when we're 2.5 hours in, if anyone wants to really listen to me. I know most of the people here, most of the people here know what we do. I mean, our hearing process, the basis of our hearing process is education and behavior change. I mean, our whole goal is to get the issue corrected. Sometimes that is effective through a citation. Sometimes it's not as effective through a citation. There are many times where folks just don't respond to a citation, so we're not able to engage. We can't force, as ECB, people to engage in our process. We try to make it as user-friendly, as accessible as we can, but we can't force anyone to participate in our hearing process. And so that's one of the ways that we address issues is through offering the hearing process to anyone who's received environmental citation. But because that's not always effective, we've also worked very hard the last couple of years to create Be More Beautiful and to address a lot of these issues through the peer-to-peer network. So both of those are our approach to behavior change, and we work with the other agencies here as well as additional city agencies on both of those efforts, but primarily through Be More Beautiful. And I'm happy to elaborate further on any of those programs or answer any questions.
I'll just say, Rebecca, really quickly, we appreciate the work you do. You very succinctly went through a lot of great stuff that you really do, so it's much appreciated. But it also speaks to the reality that it really requires this cross-agency collaboration. So again, it's appreciated. I know no one entity can do it by themselves. So again, it is appreciated. Vice Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Rebecca, thank you so much for the work that you guys are doing. I mean, that's the Be More Beautiful. I can just tell you firsthand experience in doing cleanups in the district, and we have some other that are planned. It really does go a long way of educating and also really peer pressure for people who, we had a cleanup where you guys were helpful on, where we had 100 people coming and cleaning one of the streams in my district. And so besides the fact that the materials that you guys provided, might have only cost us, a couple $100, we provided, over $5,000 worth of manpower, because we had over 100 people there for a few hours. And so certainly the return on investment of the work that you're doing is great. So we need to do more of that. But one of the things that I also have to say that I've noticed firsthand is that, I had a lot of like high school students participated, and some of them were really into it and some of them were really not into it. But the ones that were not into it, by the end of it, ended up getting into it and really felt like a degree of peer pressure to not litter and to change their behavior. And so I saw a lot of that, and it really goes a long way, which is why I'm encouraged to continue doing that. I know Councilman Burnett's also done extensive work, in that, and I see his pictures online. So it encourages me to plan more and more cleanups. But I do have to ask, because I don't have the number, and I did not see it off the top of my head. But what is Be More Beautiful's budget every year?
Our numbers shifted slightly this year, and I had them right in front of me 2 hours ago. But now I'm not sure where they are. Off the top of my head, to ballpark, we're looking at about $50,000 for the kit. So the materials that you received, and I think many, if not all, of the council members have received kits from us. And that's our vest, our trash grabber, our puncture-proof gloves, the reusable bags, and then we stuff that with as much educational material as we can possibly find throughout the city and through our nonprofit partners. So that's about $50,000 for a fiscal year. We would love to have more money for that because we have so much demand. We are as frugal as we can possibly be, but that money goes a very long way. The additional budget is about $150,000 to $165,000 for a fiscal year for Care-a-Lot. This grow season, our grow seasons obviously cover 2 different fiscal years because it starts in the spring and ends in the end of the fall. So we have 700 lots that are covered by community organizations for this particular grow season. Some of that money came from last fiscal, some from this fiscal, but the invoice rate is $22 per lot visit for up to 10 visits for the grow season. So we're going to spend about $150,000 for the grow season, but we have wide coverage with that money. And then we have 92 youth participants for this mini summer session that we do. We usually have a spring and a fall session where we our goal is about 100 youth participants. They're receiving $10 an hour for 5 hours per week for a 10-week session. The spring was canceled because of COVID. So we did a summer session to try to pick up some of those youth that would have been in Youth Works but couldn't participate or were not able to participate this year, to give them at least a little bit of something through the summer. So we did a summer session. We're going to do a fall session, and that is around $100,000 dedicated to that program as well. So total, we're looking at we have some printing costs in there as well. So we're looking at around $300,000 for a fiscal year that covers, in my opinion, a whole lot. We're trying to make the money go as far as we can. I am personally very excited that we're covering 700 lots this year. I hope John is as well. I think he is. And I think it goes further than just the fact that that lot is clean and mowed on a regular basis. We also give a sign to the group to put it on that lot and mark it as theirs. There's a sense of pride in the community for those lots that are maintained, and groups tend to continue to maintain those lots even in the off season. So we want to build on that and try to do more with actually changing lots and being able to do more with those lots. So we have a couple mini grants that we're offering this year. So it's kind of that excess money between what we already have allocated and then the $300,000 that we get in the fiscal year to do some of those projects. So we're really excited about what we can accomplish with a little bit. We would love to continue to grow. We would love this to be citywide and everyone who wants to participate can. I need my additional staff member. We're on a hiring freeze right now. I got approval to add another liaison. So I would have 2 liaisons and myself doing this. And once we get that other liaison, we'd have the manpower to do more, but we certainly can do more with more funding. It doesn't cost a whole lot.
Yes, Vice Chair Schleifer.
Wow, that's a lot of stuff for a little bit of money. So, I mean, just to really put it in perspective, I mean, it really is great work. I mean, the return on investment is incredible. But just to put in perspective, back to the point that I'm making, I know I bore people with numbers, but just my last point is that when you calculate the cost per inspection, every time an inspector has to go out to a property, there's a cost associated with it, right? Plenty of ways to figure out the number, but if you just use the basic number, it comes out to roughly $30 per inspection. So technically, if we can operate slightly more efficiently on the inspection side and do 10,000 less inspections, which I'm convinced we can do far more than that less and still have the same result. 10,000 inspections, we can double your budget and really expand your programs everywhere else. So I guess I would kind of challenge, the other partners in the trash fight to operate a little more efficiently so that we can put more money to programs like yours. And that's certainly something that we should discuss leading into next year's budget season, because it really is something a small amount of money that really goes such a long way.
Well, again, I'll say, thank you to Vice Chair Schleifer, and I would also thank you, to all the members of the committee, but also, everyone from the agencies who's here. We know it's not an easy fight that we're in, and we know we don't have all the answers today. I know Vice Chair threw out a lot of questions. I know other members of the committee also had additional questions, and they're valid ones, and they help us to get to where we need to be as a city. That being said, this issue is not over. It's not completed, and so what I would like to do, with everyone's, agreement is to keep this open, to come back and have another work session so we can get to some of the questions that were asked. I know there were some data points that would be great for other members of the committee to hear or to have possession of, as well as some of the maps as well. So if we could make a commitment to doing that, I think we'd be in a really good place. Vice Chair.
Yeah, can I introduce an amendment to that point that would just slightly alter the language, which would set this as a reoccurring thing on an official capacity with keeping it open, and it would stay open until the chair would obviously close it. So if it's okay with the chair, I'd like to submit an amendment on that I emailed to all of the colleagues.
Well, hold on. I know our staff hasn't gotten it, but I mean, we know we can keep it open. But what I'd be interested to do is, we could probably address that even at our work session, because I think it's also it's worth considering. I mean, I know that there are some other committees who have had ongoing meetings, so I'm not opposed to that as a concept. But I think it might be probably more amenable for us to do it as part of our work session. So once we can get that scheduled, and then to have a broader discussion about it. But I think it's a decent idea.
Okay, and so I guess with that, if we're going to take in that direction to, for us to be able to have like a monthly request that every time they do come back, that we can get certain data. I know one thing right off the bat that's important, at least to me, and I'm sure it's to you as well, is to get a monthly sheet of all citations and notices written in each of our districts. So that's data that's readily available. Just creating 14 different spreadsheets and on a monthly basis, sending it over to each one of us to review and see that, see what's going on in the districts.
I'll say I'm not opposed to it, but one thing, and I'm already looking over to John Chalmers, because he knows that, our office, we stay in constant communication. I know we go through through some of our issues, and we know we're some heavy hitters. So I understand that, these agencies do a lot of work for us. But I think it's a good point. I mean, again, I always agree that having more data is better than having less. And so again, if we can kind of look at, where we're getting the bang for our buck, as you might say, I think it's a good proposal. So I think so.
Yeah, and so that request is really just of HCD of code enforcement. If they can just, every month, I assume you guys have a spreadsheet on a daily basis, but once a month to just set a reminder to send each council person that list. Thank you.
And I know we can talk about it, but I mean, I don't know if there are any comments at this point, but I know, like I said, I'd like to keep it open so that we can readdress some of these issues. I know it's ongoing. Yes, we do have people on the phone, so let's try to get through our folks who are on the phone who've been so patient with us. So bear with us for a few moments.
Calling user number 5. Go ahead, please. Hello? Must have hung up. Okay.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello?
Go ahead, please.
I'm giving a call in regard to the 6500 block of Vincennes Avenue. That block is historically, it's bulk trash, it's all kinds of other trash, it's terribly overgrown. We constantly have to call, and it is absolutely deplorable. Now, we have sent a letter repeatedly to Councilman Schleifer in regard to it. We've called the 311 services prior to that time, and that 65, the entire block is overrun now with bulk trash on both sides. Bulk trash now that's even spread into the street. There's shrubbery. There's everything there. We want to know who is the inspector, and even with the 311 calls that we've called in repeatedly, what is being done? Again, it's the 6500 block of Vincennes. It's V as in Victor, INCENNES, Vincennes Avenue.
So one, ma'am, thank you for the call. I see that both your councilmen and members of representatives of DPW are also nodding their heads, so they're aware of the location as well as HED. So anybody want to chime in?
Yeah, I'll take a stab at it. So back March the 23rd, as you're aware, city services were suspended so that we could deal with the COVID pandemic. So we do currently have a backlog, and I'm going to go out on a limb and look at Jason. I know there's a service request on that property. Very familiar with it. I think I've met with you a couple of times. So it is on the radar. We are working our way through this backlog. We'll get to it sooner than later.
Yep. And
Sir, it is absolutely deplorable. There's a toilet out there. There's fencing out there. There's shrubbery of all kinds. It's overgrown. It is a dangerous street because there's a bend in it. You cannot see an approaching vehicle from the other side. It is just a terrible accident waiting to happen. I'm just staying on the line all this time because it is so serious and it's dangerous. It is absolutely dangerous. The grass is over 6 feet high. And any inspector that's been going out there, they will confirm exactly what I'm saying.
Yeah, if I can chime in, so Ms. Bradley, just so you know, I've been working with you since before I even got on the council. You showed me this spot. You're part of my inspiration to pushing this issue so much because it is something that we've been dealing with for so long. And what I would ask as a member of the committee to HCD is if you guys can look into that to see who, for Mrs. Bradley's request, who the inspector was and go back at the history. Because if you go back and look at the history, you'll see I've personally put in requests on that spot when I notice it. And I know Ms. Bradley's been doing it for a long time as well. And so if we can go back and take this as a case study and review the history and see why, what actions have been taken and what we can do differently, perhaps there's going to be a teachable moment.
Councilman, actually, we don't need to go back and look at it because I'm very familiar with the space. I've physically been out there. My inspectors are out there 2 to 3 times every week. It is a known dumping area. I don't know at the moment if we have 1 or 2 cameras there, but we always have 1 camera there. Sometimes we have 2 cameras there to try and catch the dumping because, as Ms. Bradley said, it is a bend in the road. There is a lot of privately owned vacant land in that area, and it's just historically known to be a dumping spot. And it's because of the bend in the road, they will often dump in different areas as they find out where the camera is and what's covered and what's not covered. And we've met Ms. Bradley out there on a number of occasions to show her the cameras, to go over what we're doing. We put in work orders whenever a work order is needed to have the grass cut and have the street cleaned or the lots cleaned as is appropriate.
Sir, if you're speaking of appropriate, if you were to take one look at that entire block, in all due respect, sir, I don't know what you call appropriate, because and I'm saying it with all due respect. I'll say that again. But anytime you have a toilet, you have had all kinds of fencing, you've got all kinds of other debris and everything else out there that's now spreading into the street. And as I say, the overhang and the grasses, it is dangerous because the cars, even though it's supposed to be one way, the cars take it as 2-way and they speed through there like Grant through Richmond. I'm just simply saying we urgently need the city's efforts in getting this street cleaned up. Would you please, with all of the 311 calls, there was a 311 call that went in again. I called it in on the 10th of this month. I understand about the backlog. I respect that. At the same time, this is ongoing for years. So if there are inspectors that are coming out, then please prior to the ticket being closed out, rather than the ticket being closed out when it's dispersed to whatever assignment person that's assigned to it. Why not there be a before and after photo? That before and after photo should then be submitted with the closed file.
Again, well, thank you. I think folks noted that. We're trying to get some more calls as well.
One more call. Let's see. Caller number 3. Go ahead, please. Caller number 3, you're on. Hello? Looks like they left.
Okay, thank you. So I think we've gotten through our calls as well. Again, I think that last call kind of spoke volumes. Again, something that's a long-standing issue, but also the difficulty in trying to address it. So again, that's what, thank you all in terms of the work you're doing. I mean, seeing the heads nodding that these are not unfamiliar issues and not things you haven't thought about before, but then how we can handle them. So thank you also. Thank you, Councilman Schleifer, for raising this issue. Again, many of our districts, all of us have been, pretty much dealing with some of these issues, some of us more so than others. So again, thank you all for your work. And as I mentioned, this is not done. And so I know there's some commitments in terms of what information is forthcoming. So I'm looking forward to getting additional information. And so with that, it looks like we'll close out for this afternoon. Again, I thank you all for the patience today. I mean, we're at 4:49, and so we spent a good about 2.5 hours at this point. So again, thank you all for your diligence. Thank you all. I see my man throwing it up there. Look, I was going to have to be here. So enjoy the rest of the evening. With that, we'll still adjourn. Good evening.
All right, Mr. Chair, can we close?